Hi, my name is Steve Antonuccio, and this program I originally gave for the Pillar Institute of Colorado Springs. Um, I've written a book about my career. I spent 30 years working in public academic libraries, and my book is called "There's No Such Thing as a Typical Librarian," which you can get on Amazon for $19.99. But I want to talk a little bit about something from my book about Silver Dollar Tabor, Rosemary Silver Dollar Echo Tabor. There was a chapter in my book called "The Greater Barrier," and I talk about Silver Dollar in this wonderful film that was discovered that was shot in 1914 in Colorado Springs that includes scenes with Silver Dollar, a beautiful young woman born into absolute luxury, wealthy family. Her mother was Baby Doe Tabor. Her father was Horace Tabor, and he was a silver baron. He was worth at the time $6 million, which was about $160 million in today's dollars. Extremely wealthy man. Lost his fortune, unfortunately, when the United States went on the gold standard. And she started out with this wonderful young life. Anything she wanted, she could get. And then by the time she was 7 years old, they had lost their fortune. And it was just a downward spiral from there, unfortunately. But this is the beautiful Rosemary Echo Silver Dollar Tabor, born in 1889. It was the second marriage of her father, Horace Tabor, who married a woman who was 25 years younger than him, who's named Elizabeth Baby Doe. And they had two children. Lily was the oldest, born in 1884, a year after they were married. And then Silver Dollar was the youngest, born in 1889. Both beautiful young women, different coloring. Elizabeth Lily Tabor had the coloring of her mother. She was a natural blonde. Silver Dollar had the coloring of her father. She was a beautiful brunette, beautiful brown eyes, as you'll see in the film footage I'm going to show you a little later on. But this is their father, Horace Austin Warner Tabor, born in 1830. Once he made his money, he decided to get involved in politics, and he was lieutenant governor of Colorado, and he was appointed senator, United States senator, for 1 year, replacing Henry Teller, who was appointed to the administration of Chester Arthur. And Unfortunately, the scandal came out about him having this affair with Baby Doe Tabor and the divorce of his wife Augusta after 25 years. And it pretty much destroyed his political career. To some extent, that has gone away in politics. You can almost do anything and still be elected to office. But back then, certainly, if you had left your original wife for a young woman, that was an incredible scandal. And certainly for Horace, who was one of the most famous people in Colorado, this was devastating to his career, but it was worth it to him. He was in love with Baby Doe. By all accounts, it was a marriage of love, although it didn't hurt that he had a fortune worth $190 million. But Baby Doe was not a gold digger. She did fall in love with him. She had divorced her first husband, who was pretty much a ne'er-do-well, and caused her a lot of problems. But Horace kept her before he divorced his first wife for a couple years in an apartment in Leadville, and they were seeing each other until the divorce was final. She finally gave him permission to divorce. The most unfortunate thing that happened to Horace was the repeal of the Sherman Silver Purchase Act. The United States government had been purchasing silver before then, and so the price of silver had held steady because of that. They knew that it was going to be purchased by the U.S. government, and then the U.S. government decided to go on the gold standard after the market crash of 1893, and that pretty much devastated Horace's fortune. He tried to hold on to it. He thought to himself that silver would make a comeback, and so what he did is he mortgaged a lot of his properties and purchased more silver mines, but it never made a comeback, and he lost it all, and banks foreclosed on his other properties. This is his first wife, Augusta Pierce Tabor, born in 1833. She was only 3 years younger than him, and they had a long marriage, 25 years, and they were good business partners. She was the brains behind the business. There are a couple ways you could make money in mining. You could find a silver mine or find a gold mine and make a fortune that way, or you could supply the miners with supplies like axes and sleeping bags and other things they would need to prospect. And that's what he did. Their business supplied the miners. But he was smart. He decided he wanted to grub stake a lot of these miners. So he made a deal with them. He would provide them with free supplies. If they were to strike silver, then he would own half of that mine. And many of them did that because they didn't have any money to prospect. And there was these two German miners who came into Leadville, and they signed the contract with Horace. And sure enough, they struck it rich. They found a silver mine, and Horace ended up owning half of that mine. And they eventually purchased the mine from them and made a small fortune on that, and eventually invested in another mine that even made more money. And that was the source of his fortune. This is Elizabeth McCourt Baby Doe Tabor. The reason why she had the nickname Baby Doe is her first husband was named Harvey Doe, so Doe was her last name. And they owned some silver mines that didn't pan out. They were worthless. But she would go in there in overalls and she would help prospect in those mines. And she had such a baby face that the other miners who saw her in the mine would call her Baby. And the name stuck, and the nickname stuck, Baby Doe. Even after she married Horace Tabor, they still called her Baby Doe. But beautiful young woman. She was 25 years younger than Horace, born in 1854. And it was said to be a genuine love affair. They fell in love, even though, certainly his fortune didn't hurt, having $7 million back then. But he kept her in an apartment in Leadville, Colorado, until he could convince his wife to let him get a divorce, which she agreed to do. And this is Horace and Baby Doe. They were married in 1883. They were secretly married a year before that, but he still had a relationship with his wife. Their marriage was still intact. And then he was able to divorce his wife, and it caused a huge scandal. Of course, he was going to run for U.S. Senator. Once this term was up, after he was being appointed senator, but he really couldn't do anything. His political career was over because of such a scandal, and she was shunned by other women in Washington, D.C. So it was very difficult at first, but then Horace had an idea. He said, what if I was able to get Chester Arthur, president, to come to our wedding and even give her away? Now, I assume maybe some money passed hands to Chester Arthur in order to do that, but he felt it would give her instant respectability if the president was at their wedding. And sure enough, they had the wedding, a spectacular wedding in Washington, D.C. Now, Chester A. Arthur, if you don't know who he was, there was a great miniseries on Netflix called Death by Lightning, and it talks about the assassination of James Garfield, and Chester Arthur succeeded James Garfield. And was a pretty good president by all accounts. He had some medical conditions, so he did not try to run for a second term. Now, this is the beautiful Tabor Opera House in Denver. It was built for $1 million by Horace Tabor. At that time, in 1881, he was seeing Baby Doe, and he wanted to build an opera house for her. And he spent $1 million on this opera house, which would be $25 million in today's dollars. Spectacular opera house, beautiful opera house. Back then, before movies and before television, everyone went to the opera. If you wanted to see vaudeville, if you wanted to see a play, if you wanted to see a musical, if you wanted to see a performing group, it would all be shown in an opera. And this is one of the finest opera houses in the West. And unfortunately, it did not last. They tore it down in 1964. This was before historic preservation was really popular. I wish they had kept it because it's a beautiful building. once opera started to die down and silent films became the thing, they turned into movie theaters. And this opera house was a movie theater until 1964. And it just became too expensive to keep. So they tore the whole thing down. This is their first daughter, born just a year after they were married. And this is the beautiful Elizabeth Bondule Lily Tabor. She was named after her mother, Elizabeth Baby Doe. And just a beautiful little girl. Because they were a wealthy family and they had this beautiful child, their births were covered by Harper's Magazine, which was a national magazine at the time. So everybody knew about Baby Doe and Horace Tabor and their lovely children. And this is one of the photos that was in Harper's Magazine. Now, Elizabeth was born in 1884. Again, she was the first child. And when they started losing their money, she was a teenager. And it was very difficult on her because there's so much scrutiny on the Tabor family. They were like the Kardashians of their generation. People followed the Tabors. And I think most poor people were secretly happy that they lost their fortune. But Elizabeth, it was too much pressure. She was living under so much scrutiny that she begged her mother and father to let her move somewhere where people didn't know who she was. And her mother agreed to let her move to Wisconsin to live with her mother's sister. She was the only one to come out of this horrible experience with a normal life. She lived with her cousin, and she fell in love with her first cousin. John Last was his name. And they ended up getting married. They ended up having 3 children. He had a tool and die shop. He would build tools. They were fairly successful, middle-class life. And even though it wasn't the extravagance of her early life, it was something that she preferred, having a family life. Unfortunately, that didn't happen to Silver Dollar or even to Baby Doe. Their scrutiny was incredible after the fortune was lost. So this is Silver Dollar Tabor as a child, as a baby. Beautiful young baby. When she was born, I think the day she was born, Williams Jennings Bryan came to visit them in Denver. And he was a proponent of the silver. So it was important for Horace that the politicians that he befriended wanted to keep silver as a standard for the United States. When he was there, she was cooing, and he heard her voice, and he said, she has the voice that kind of has the ring of a silver dollar. And they hadn't named her yet. And so Baby Doe and Horace said, well, that's great. Let's name her Silver Dollar. So that's how she got her name, Rosemary Echo Silver Dollar Tabor. So it wasn't a nickname. Silver Dollar was her given name. Her nickname was actually Honey Maid. And of course, this photo was published nationally in Harper's Magazine. And they lived such an extravagant lifestyle that her diaper pins were diamond tipped. It was that kind of thing. Everything they did was first class in how they approached things. But just a beautiful baby. You can see later on the pictures of her, how she really looks just like her baby picture. And there she is, probably about 12 years old at this time. And so she was pretty much depressed from the time she started a teenager. She had lost her father. Her family had lost their fortune. There was all the scrutiny on the family that was difficult, particularly since they had no money at the time. And you can see it in her face, but a lovely face, beautiful brown eyes, beautiful brown hair, an absolutely gorgeous young girl. This was the mansion they lived in. This is the mansion that Lily and Silver Dollar grew up in. Beautiful mansion in Denver. Again, they had everything they could possibly want. Now, when they lost their fortune, around 1895, by that time they had lost everything, 1896. Silver Dollar was only 6, 7 years old. Lily was a teenager at the time. But her father called in some political favors, and he was able to get a job as the postmaster of Denver. So they did have some income coming in, and he could take care of his family. But they had to move into this house after they went broke. Imagine going from this beautiful mansion to this little brick house in Denver. And it was very difficult for the family to make that adjustment. In fact, Horace died of an appendicitis just a few years after he became postmaster of Denver in 1899. So now their family had no support. They had no income coming in. It was just Baby Doe and Silver Dollar together, borrowing money from family, trying to keep things going. And of course, Lily moved out to Wisconsin because she couldn't take the pressure of living in Denver. And now they had no father. This is Silver Dollar at 14 years old. Again, every picture of her, with one exception, I'm going to show you, just this melancholy expression, never smiling, just brooding, looks depressed, but absolutely beautiful, absolutely gorgeous young woman. And the people still knew who she was in Denver. And so, they were still attracted to the Tabor family, even though they had no money at that time. Now, Silver Dollar was very creative. She loved to read. She read everything she could. And she even worked for a time as a reporter for several Denver papers. And she had written a song on Teddy Roosevelt, for Teddy Roosevelt. That was fairly popular. She got to meet him in Denver, and he thanked her for writing this song. You can see that's the only time that she's actually smiling in a picture. And so at 20 years old, she wrote a book. She wrote a novella that was published in 1909, and it's called The Star of Blood. And it's based on an actual person, a notorious highwayman named Allen Hench Downen. And it also includes a story of his lover, a sporting lady, a prostitute at the time named Artie Dallas. Now, I don't know if his lover really existed or if that was just a story. Silver Dollar needed a woman in the story to make it a romance. But she wrote the woman. She modeled Artie Dallas after herself, which is interesting because 15 years later, when she died in Chicago, they kind of had this identical fate. And I'll read from the book later on. But it's actually not a bad novel. It's fairly well written, considering it was a 20-year-old who wrote it. It's published in her biography, which is called A Leaf in the Storm, published in its entirety, as well as letters from Silver Dollar to her mother that her mother kept after she left to Colorado Springs and left to Chicago. But you can see Silver did the illustrations for the book, and she created Artie Dallas after herself. Looks just like her, brunette, beautiful brunette. And it was patterned just after Silver. Here's another beautiful picture of Silver Dollar, probably about the time the book was published. Very similar in appearance. Now, this is the book, the biography on Silver Dollar Tabor, written by Evelyn Furman and published in 1982. It's not the best book in the world, but it does have some wonderful things in it. For one thing, it has her entire novella, The Star of Blood, in its entirety, that you can read the book, which I did. You can get a sense of how well she could write at 20 years old. But it's called The Leaf in the Storm. And Silver Dollar describes herself in a letter to her mother as the leaf in the storm, and that's where the title came from. But the letters are priceless. Silver Dollar didn't save any of the letters from her mother, but her mother saved all the letters for Silver Dollar. So it really kind of tells you what this dysfunctional relationship was all about. Now, they had a very difficult, codependent, dysfunctional relationship. And her mother tried to control Silver Dollar for many reasons. She didn't have anyone else in her life. Lily had left to Wisconsin, and her mother only had, and her husband had died in 1899. So all she had was Silver Dollar. And she tried to completely control her. She knew Silver Dollar was a beautiful young woman, and she wanted Silver Dollar to marry someone that had money, and that would help them restore their wealth and their reputation. So if Silver Dollar had a relationship or fell in love with someone, unless he was a wealthy man, the mother would interfere and make sure that the relationship ended. And this is after one of those relationships ended to her friend Ed Levin. And so she writes to her mother, and it's not it's not like Dear Mom. You can tell this is a very angry letter. She writes, Mrs. Tabor, Ed just came and said that we could not go together again. He is afraid of trouble from you. What did you tell him that I told you that he was and I were going to get married for, when you know you were telling a lie and I never told you so? And why did you speak of the masked ball? I'll just skip ahead to the letter. She's very angry with her mother. Her mother was responsible for breaking up a potential relationship. I'll go to the end. You should not have dared to mention anything to the expressman. It is no one's business, and you have no right to peddle it. No, you do not love me. If you did, you would not ruin me. All is over. Ed does not know I love him, and I never want him to know, because he is lost. May God pity you. And she signs it The Leaf in the Storm, which is a perfect metaphor for her life and how she lived her life as an adult, going from one romance to another and getting married for a year and that failing. It was a very difficult life for her. And it's very much like Marilyn Monroe, Candle in the Wind, written by Elton John. But this tells everything you need to know about her relationship, her dysfunctional relationship with her mother. Now, this is an interesting time. This is 1914 when she moves to Colorado Springs for a year. And we're very lucky to have this film called The Greater Barrier, which features Silver Dollar in the movie, not as a leading actress, but as a supporting actress. But she wrote this letter to her mother November 8th, 1914, on the letterhead of the Pikes Peak Films Company. And it's very revealing about, how dysfunctional the relationship was and what was going on with this film company. Now, the headquarters for this film company still exists. I'll show you in a little bit. It's actually an apartment building. But she uses the film company's letterhead to write her letter. She says, Dear Mother, I received a night letter this morning, and I am very, very sorry that you are sick. Again, the mother would tell her how sick she was, how broke she was, and then Silver Dollar would write back and tell her how horrible it was for her as well. So this back and forth, trying to compare their sorrow. Write and tell me what is the matter. I'm writing this at the studio. I am all made up, ready for work, but the sun is poor today, and I do not think we can make any pictures. I'm going to move into a private house where they keep a few roomers, a very refined, strict place. I'm going there as I can have the barn and keep Polly for about $6 a month by feeding her just hay and alfalfa and no oats and not having her shod and not riding her. I can turn her out in the backyard in the daytime and do the work myself. I will need the revolver, so if I have to go way out to the barn on dark nights, if I heard noises there, I wouldn't be so terrified. Polly might get sick or something. She is sweeter all the time. Don't send me any money. You need that yourself, and I would die if you did without anything to send it to me, and I know how you need it. I can get along if I can have my coat and revolver. I'm washing and cleaning and making all my old clothes over. I'm made up as a spinster today, but I generally have pretty parts. However, it makes me more desirable, for I can take any part. I really have made good and done perfect work from the very start. It will fortify me for my long, lonesome life, and I don't have so much time to brood and be unhappy. How revealing is that about her depression, and then sharing it with her mother, trying to make her mother feel bad as well. I'm always busy or tired. Write me right away. I do not believe you want to lower yourself by writing to me yourself. With love, Silver. Very dysfunctional relationship. And I think that's why Silver made sure to leave Leadville for good. After she went to Colorado Springs for the year that the film company was open, and the film company eventually went out of business. They went to another city. I think they went to Denver. But this is where the film company's headquarters with. It's no longer 610 Cascade Avenue, because I think the address had changed at some point with extra buildings being built on that street. But this is the original building. It's a Cascade Apartments. It was built in 1885. So it's, over 120 years old. And just a beautiful building. So after she left Colorado Springs, she moved to Chicago, where she lived until she died in 1935 at the age of 36 years old. And Chicago is not a good place to live if you are a person with addiction. And she was addicted to alcohol, certainly after Prohibition in the mid-1920s. Alcohol was available in Chicago almost anywhere in the United States. And she was also addicted to what was called the happy dust, which is cocaine, which was not a controlled substance at the time. So anybody could get cocaine and morphine as well. But here she is, she's writing her letter. She's trying to live off of her looks, which is not the best thing in the world for anyone. And so she became a chorus girl, and she's writing her mother about this group that she worked with. I received your letter just before I left Denver. I hope I shall never have to be seen again by anyone who knows me. If I ever pass through Colorado with a show, I shall be so well disguised and use another name that no one will recognize me. And she's concerned because here she is, a showgirl, and she's a Tabor, and she doesn't want people to know that she's a Tabor. I left Denver with the Minstrel Maid Company as a chorus girl. Harry Hart was producer. He is the lame man you knew at the Milo who told all about the penitentiary. He is a brute to work for, always drunk and a vile temper. I quit 4 times before the company went on the rocks, and each time went to work again to please Shane and Anderson, the owners. They would have made good if Hart hadn't done them out of a lot of money and played dirty at every turn. Shane and Anderson were fine men. When the ship was about to sink, Hart blew out unexpectedly. He is the lowest cur I've ever met. When I left Denver, Phil told me that any time I got up against it to wire him. So I wired him for enough money to come to Chicago. Work is plentiful here, but I'm having a hard time to get a place as I have not had enough chorus experience. I think I can manage to get in some company, though. So here she is, 25 years old, working as a chorus girl. That didn't really pan out for very long. So she had to find another source of income. She was a mistress for a mobster and other people. It was rumored that she was a prostitute. She might have been, but she certainly went from one relationship to another. She even got married for a year. But she had these addictions. She was addicted to alcohol, and she was addicted to cocaine. So a lot of any money she made would go to her addictions. And her life, when she moved to Chicago, was just a downward spiral after that, unfortunately. But her sister Elizabeth was living a normal life in Wisconsin. She was the one who was able to get away. And the mother, at this point, was an older woman. She had lost her looks. Baby Doe had lost her looks, as we all do when we age. And when Silver Dollar died in 1935, most likely murdered, and I'll go into more detail about that later, the mother would tell people that wasn't Silver Dollar who was killed in Chicago, because it had gotten publicity in Denver that the Silver Dollar was murdered. She says, no, that must have been another woman, because my daughter is in a convent. Baby Doe was a devout Catholic, so she said her daughter was in a convent and doing very well. That wasn't the case. And this is Baby Doe's last place where she lived. It was the cabin at the Matchless Mine. Her husband had owned the Matchless Silver Mine, and he told Baby Doe to keep the mine because silver prices will come back at some point. Now, they have come back today. Silver is dramatically up today, but back then they had dropped to like 30 cents an ounce. And so she lived at the Matchless Mine. It's not clear whether she owned the mine or if the owners just let her live there, out of respect to the Tabor family. But she spent the last 30 years living at the Matchless Mine. And in 1935, she died, and that's when her body was found frozen. Now, she probably didn't freeze to death. She probably just died of a heart attack, and then the coals went out in the cabin. And eventually she froze to the floor. But very tragic end for both Silver Dollar and for Baby Doe Tabor. Now, the family was still very well known, because many of the people remembered when they were rich, they remembered the scandal, and it was ripe for a movie. And Hollywood decided to make a movie, calling it Silver Dollar. 1932 it came out with Edward G. Robinson, who was one of the biggest stars at the time. I think Edward G. Robinson is arguably one of the top 5 actors of the 20th century. A brilliant actor. I mean, Key Largo, his performance is incredible in Key Largo. Key Largo. He's such a despicable person in that film. But his real name, he was Jewish, was Emanuel Goldenberg. And the reason why he had the initial G is to give homage to his birth name, which was Goldenberg. And so they had the premiere in Denver. It was a huge, huge occasion. Again, they were very well known at the time. And so when they made the movie, although they couldn't use the name Tabor, they had to fictionalize it because a lot of people were still alive, including Baby Doe Tabor, who was living in the Matchless Mine at that time, because the film came out in 32. She died in 35. But they asked her to come to the premiere. And she said no, she refused to do it because at that time she was an old woman living in poverty and she didn't want people to see her like that. But the movie was a huge success. And I'm going to show you the preview of the film.
From the smelter.
He didn't understand it was silver.
Oh, yay! Come on in.
Now, maybe they'll listen to me. It's silver. I told you there was gold here. What do you think of me now?
It isn't gold, it's silver.
It's silver. What do I care? It's the same thing, only spelled different.
I nominate Yates Martin as the first mayor of Denver, Colorado.
Yates Martin's after gold. And there's enough gold in these mountains to bury us all in gold caskets. Oh, heck, I'll buy you all another drink.
Yates Martin is elected!
This is a great day for me. And I hope that during my period in office, there will be greater days for the people of the state of Colorado. Just think of General Grant coming way out here just to open an opera house. Why, Lily, the eyes of the country were on Denver tonight.
The eyes of the country were on you, Yates Martin.
To the bride.
To the bride!
To the loveliest bride of this year, or any year.
Well, now that makes it official. That's the president talking.
So this is the book and the person who I credit for this program I'm doing today. This book is written by David Emrich. It's called Hollywood, Colorado. And it's a history of filmmaking in Colorado before Hollywood even existed. Most of these companies were headquartered in Chicago, and Westerns were very popular with the early silent films. So a lot of Westerns were shot in Colorado, and David researched these films. He put together a video that accompanied the book. I think Hollywood, Colorado was published in 1990, and it hasn't been reprinted, but there are copies you can get on Amazon. But it's a great book about early filmmaking in Colorado. And while he was researching his book, he discovered this film called The Greater Barrier, which was shot in 1914 in Colorado Springs. He discovered it in the Library of Congress. And so he had it transferred to video. And he wasn't sure what he had. It was titled an orphan film, but he knew it was shot in Colorado. And he discovered it was this remarkable movie called The Greater Barrier, shot in Colorado Springs. And it featured a young Silver Dollar Tabor, 24 years old, who was in this movie as a supporting actress. She's featured prominently in the film, as you'll see when I show it to you. But I give David Emmerich all the credit. We never would have found this film. There are 10 films made by the Pikes Peak Films Company, and this is the only film that they're able to discover. It was originally nitrate film, which is very explosive format, and they were able to transfer it to video with a good quality copy. Now, in 2011, the Pikes Peak Library District did a symposium, a history symposium, on film and photography on the Front Range, and they published a book. I wrote a chapter on the Alexander Film Company. Kenneth Paul Fletcher wrote a chapter on the Otis B. Thayer and the Pikes Peak Films Company. As excellent chapter, it talks about the 1 year that Otis Thayer was in Colorado Springs producing these films. Otis Thayer, very, very talented director, writer for his time. But unfortunately, they did 10 of these films in Colorado Springs, and only one is still around, and that's The Greater Barrier. This is Otis Thayer. Born in 1862, he directed The Greater Barrier in 1914, and he owned the Pikes Peak Films Company. They originally were in Canyon City the year before. They were the Colorado Motion Picture Company. And again, they did mostly Westerns. Tom Mix did a lot of his Westerns in Canyon City. And you can see Otis B. Thayer on the running board of the car with the camera. But he was responsible. He was the creative force behind this company. And then unfortunately, when they were in Canyon City, the company was doing very well. Actress Grace McHugh was on a horse. They were doing this filming near the Arkansas River, and she fell off the horse into the Arkansas. The cameraman, Owen Carter, went after her. He tried to save her life, but they ended up both drowning in the Arkansas River. And it was a Western called Across the Border. But it was a disaster for the film company because of all the lawsuits. They had to go out of business, and then they reopened the next year in Colorado Springs as the Pikes Peak Films Company. And this is the last film they did. It's rather clever how they promoted it. It was a very controversial film. It was about abortion, but it was anti-abortion. And they talk about abortion fairly frankly in the film. And what they did is they had a great way of promoting it. They would only let women come to the matinee because they didn't want them to be intimidated by any man that was there. And in the evening, both men and women could go. And you can see in the advertisement, it says over 30,000 women saw The Unborn in Chicago last week. Over 50,000 men and women were turned away in Chicago. The men would come in the afternoon. So it was a popular way of promoting it. Unfortunately, this film does not exist. I would love it if it existed because it was shot in Colorado Springs, and of course, it would show downtown Colorado Springs. Now, this is Silver Dollar Tabor, again, at the end of her life. She was in Chicago. At this point, she had bobbed her hair, very modern, thoroughly modern Millie, like the film suggested. But she was into the Chicago lifestyle, the drinking, the cocaine. It was not good. And of course, she had multiple relationships with different men. Again, she was a leaf in the storm. She would go from one relationship to another. And you would see it in these letters she'd write to her mother. She was, I'm going with this guy now. She said that she had gotten married for a year, and then that ended in divorce. But most likely she was a prostitute at that time in her life, taking money to have sex with men. And one of her customers was a speakeasy owner named Jack Reed. And it's interesting. He was probably abusive because what she wrote on the back of his photograph, she wrote on the back of his photograph, it said, "In case I am killed, arrest this man, for he will be directly or indirectly responsible for my death." And what had happened is Silver Dollar had boiled a pot of hot boiling water on a stove. And she either poured it on herself in an attempt to commit suicide or accidentally poured it on herself. But what most likely happened is this Jack Reed poured it on her and killed her. It took about an hour for her to die. What a painful death. But again, on the back of the photograph, she wrote, "In case I am killed, arrest this man, for he will be directly or indirectly responsible for my death." Now, they called him in. The police came and they talked to him. And of course, he denied everything. And maybe because he was a speakeasy owner and he had connections with the police, but they let him go. And tragically, she was killed, most likely murdered in 1925. She went from this beautiful little pampered Silver Dollar Tabor, a little girl that had everything in the world that she could possibly want, that money could buy, to an unmarked grave in Alsip, Illinois. Now, the only reason why she has a marked grave now is because several Tabor historians tried to find her grave, and they did find her unmarked grave, and they paid for a headstone in 1957. And they donated it, and the headstone is there on her grave in the cemetery in Alsip. And the three historians, I want to give them credit because it's a wonderful thing what they did. Carolyn Bancroft, who was a Tabor historian in Denver, and two other historians, Tom Peavy and Burt Baker, paid for this headstone. Now, it's interesting because Silver Dollar was prophetic in terms of her fate. It's almost as if she knew what was going to happen in the future. And so in her book, she wrote about Artie Dallas and how she died, which is almost identical to how Silver Dollar died. Now, I'll read you from her book the exact words she wrote 15 years before her death in Chicago. "The heroine of his Bowery romance, Artie Dallas, now lies in an unmarked grave in Pauper's Field, which happened to Silver, with only gray rocks to mark her resting place and only weeds to decorate it. No friend visits her lowly grave, but perhaps occasionally a wild bird hovers over the lovely spot, chanting a carol whose plaintive notes ascend into the infinite realm above and invocate, 'Be merciful to her, for she knew not what she did.' It had all ended. Artie was gone. No more would she rove the streets bareheaded with the winter wind piteously cutting her half-naked body in a mad effort to find food and shelter. Never again would she be found drunk in the Market Street gutters. Never again would Artie suffer." I mean, she's telling her story. How remarkable is that to 15 years before it actually happened for her to know her fate? And of course, this was written by Silver Dollar Tabor from her novella, Star of Blood. And this is the beautiful Silver Dollar. And with the magic of AI, I'm going to bring back this lovely woman to life. And now I'm going to play clips from the Greater Barrier for a little documentary I did, which is on YouTube. And it kind of tells the story of the meaning behind the Greater Barrier. Very sophisticated film. The title, and you'll see Silver Dollar in there. She's featured prominently. All right, this is the opening sequence for the Greater Barrier. Again, shot in 1914 in Colorado Springs. This is the Colorado College football team. And in the background, in the center frame, you'll see Rosemary Silver Dollar Tabor. She's probably the most beautiful woman on the screen at that time. Beautiful brown hair, smiling and laughing. Although she's not the lead in the picture. The lead is the young woman in front of her. There she is. That's Josephine West, who's playing Myrtle Carroll. But Rosemary is kind of photobombing every shot, getting her face in the picture. And that's the lead's boyfriend, Cato Dickey, played by George Gebhardt. And of course, he's a Colorado College football player. He makes the winning score, wins the game, and is a hero. Their attraction for each other grows. But at the time when they filmed this, they paid the Colorado College football students, players, $1 a player, silver dollar a player to be in the game. Now this is Palmer Hall in the background at Colorado College. I think it was built in 1903, just a few years earlier. And this is when their relationship starts to heat up. They start to realize that they're falling in love with each other. And it's a real dramatic scene. Now, in one scene, you get the sense that they have feelings for each other. He holds her hand. She holds his hand. And then he explains that he's falling in love with her. And the camera slowly pans up. Very dramatic film. You can almost see what they're thinking. That this is a relationship that's forbidden, that shouldn't be, but they both have strong feelings for each other. This film was discovered by Colorado film historian Dave Emmerich at in the Library of Congress. He found it in 1980, and it was labeled orphan film. No one knew who made it at the time. He just researched it and discovered that it was in the collection. It was had a 35 millimeter master that had been shot on nitrate-based film. Most of the nitrate-based films were consumed by fire because it was such a touchy format at the time. So it was remarkable that this film even existed. And then Dave had it transferred to video, and of course identified who was in this movie, and they recognized that Rosemary Silver Dollar Tabor was featured in this film. So anyway, Cato's back at his dorm room. I like his dorm room. It's very, very much a Native American dorm room. And by the way, the actor was not Native American. He was Caucasian. But he gets a letter from Myrtle that says, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to break up with you, or we can't have a relationship because the barrier of blood. You're Native American and I'm Caucasian. It's just not going to work out. And then he sends her a letter, and he says the same thing. He understands why she's breaking up with him, and it's never going to work between them, and he's going to go back to his reservation. Quit college and go back to the reservation. So here he is. He's back to the reservation. He reunites with his mother. This was shot at the Garden of the Gods Visitor Center, which they tore down when they built the new one. So there are plenty of great locations around Colorado Springs that are featured in this film. And as Cato lives on, he gets tired of the Indian life. He's used to the Western world. So he really has nowhere to go. This was shot at the Cliff Dwellings. And he decides to take off and find work. Of course, Pikes Peak is prominent in the background in many of the shots in this film. He finds work at a ranch, and he doesn't really know that it's actually owned by her uncle. And what's interesting is she is orphaned by her mother and father, and her uncle takes care of her. And certainly during the summertime, she stays with her uncle. But he's hired as a ranch hand, breaking horses and doing other work. As you can see, this is a real working ranch. I'm not sure what ranch it was, but it's right at the foothills of the Front Range there near Pikes Peak. And of course, the college term ends, and she's getting ready to go back to stay with her uncle and her aunt. She doesn't know that Cato is there at the ranch working as a ranch hand. And of course, featured in the background prominently is the poor little rich girl, Mary Silver Dollar Tabor. And as you can see, what a beauty she was. She almost outshines the lead actress. But again, tragically, her life ends in Chicago in 1925 at the age of 36. So Cato gets paid. There's a couple of interesting things when they show his check. I don't know why he wouldn't know before, but he realizes that his boss is actually related to his the woman that he's interested in Myrtle Carroll. He reads the check and he sees that it's signed by Carroll, David Carroll. Now, the check is for $30. It's dated November 30th, 1914. So I'm assuming that's what he made in a month, $30 a month. Then Myrtle arrives at the ranch. She's reunited with her aunt and her uncle. And then Cato realizes that she came to the ranch. And after a while, since they're there together, they can't help but renew their relationship. Now his mother goes to the ranch and she sees that they are romantically involved or getting romantically involved. And it's very worrying for her. And they tell her uncle and her aunt that they're going to get married. And they don't care. He says, you know him as a very sincere, quality person, so he doesn't object to the wedding at all of her marrying a Native American. But her mother wants to speak to him. And this is where there's a plot twist in this film. So he goes outside and she explains to him why they can't get married. It turns out that his father is actually her father. His mother, Cato's mother, had an affair with her father. So if they were to get married, it would be incest. Hence the title, The Greater Barrier. The Greater Barrier is incest. So he has to break up with her, tells her goodbye. And it's interesting, this film theme was repeated in the movie Lone Star by John Sayles, which featured Chris Cooper and Matthew McConaughey. But very sophisticated theme for that time. And of course, wonderful film for many reasons. As an orphan film, the subject matter, and also the fact it featured Colorado Springs and Mary Silver Dollar Tabor. And let's bring her back to life again with the magic of AI. This is kind of a little bit colorized in this photo. And again, this is my book. There's no such thing as a typical librarian, which tells your story in the chapter, The Greater Barrier, and you can purchase my book on Amazon for under $20. Thank you again. I appreciate you taking the time to watch this program.